The night before our divorce, my husband climbed into my bed for the first time in nearly 6 months. His voice was soft in the darkness, almost tender. Just one last time. He placed his phone on my nightstand, and a second later the screen lit up. A message preview flashed before he could reach for it. Did she sign everything yet? Oof. And in that single line, everything I thought I knew about my marriage rearranged itself forever. Claire Morrison used to believe betrayal arrived loudly. Slammed doors, lipstick stains on collars, neighbors whispering across fences in suburban kitchens. She used to think marriages ended in spectacular disasters, moments people could point to afterward and say, that was when everything fell apart. But real betrayal, she learned at 38, arrived quietly. It arrived in long silences over dinner, in unanswered texts, in separate grocery lists taped to the same refrigerator, in the way her husband no longer looked up when she walked into a room. Their house in Neatville, Illinois had once felt warm and alive. Science projects drying on the kitchen counter, soccer cleats abandoned by the garage door, Ethan humming while making coffee before work. Now the place felt staged, like an open house nobody actually lived in. Their daughter Lily had started spending more time at friends' houses without either parent asking too many questions. Children always sensed the weather inside a marriage long before the adults admitted there was a storm. Claire worked 12-hour shifts as a surgical nurse at Edward Hospital, and exhaustion had become the easiest way to avoid thinking about her marriage. Ethan worked downtown for a logistics finance company, wore tailored suits that smelled faintly of expensive cologne and commuter trains, and had slowly become someone she no longer recognized. Or maybe, she sometimes wondered late at night, he had always been that person. The divorce itself had been strangely calm. No screaming, no dishes thrown against walls. Ethan had simply sat across from her at the kitchen island one rainy February evening and said, "I don't think we make each other happy anymore." That sentence had landed with terrifying gentleness, because deep down Claire knew he was right. At least that was what she believed at the time. She should have been asleep that night. She had an early shift, and her feet still ached from standing in an operating room for most of the day. But sleep had become unreliable lately, arriving in fragments instead of comfort. So when Ethan quietly pushed open the bedroom door around midnight, Claire immediately sat upright. "The Lily?" She asked instinctively. "She's fine," he said. The room was dim, lit only by amber streetlight bleeding through the curtains. Ethan stood there wearing gray sweatpants and an old college t-shirt Claire hadn't seen in years. The sight hit her unexpectedly hard, because it reminded her of the man she married before promotions and money and distance had hollowed him out from the inside. He walked slowly around the bed and sat beside her. The mattress dipped beneath his weight, and Claire's entire body stiffened automatically. They hadn't shared a bed since January. Ethan leaned back against the headboard with a slow exhale and placed his phone face up on her nightstand. Then he turned toward her. "Just one last time," he whispered. Those words slid into her chest like a knife wrapped in velvet, because despite everything, despite the distance and the paperwork and the years of quiet coldness between them, one small, humiliating part of Claire still loved him. She hated herself for that. But love did not disappear simply because it became inconvenient. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Claire could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan and distant traffic outside. Ethan's hand brushed hers lightly on top of the blanket, tentative, almost uncertain, and memories came flooding back before she could stop them. Their first apartment in Aurora, eating takeout Chinese food on the floor because they couldn't afford furniture. Holding Lily for the first time in a hospital room filled with exhausted happiness. That was the cruel thing about endings. Your mind always insisted on replaying the beginning. Claire thought, maybe this was grief. Maybe two people could fail each other for years and still mourn what they once were. Maybe Ethan simply wanted to say goodbye in the only language they had left. Then his phone lit up. The bright screen cut through the darkness instantly. And because it was inches from her eyes, because Ethan had carelessly left message previews on, Claire read the text before he even realized it had appeared. Did she sign everything yet? Esya. The message from someone saved as Vanessa. Claire went cold. Not angry, not at first. Cold. The kind of cold that started in the stomach and spread outward until even breathing felt strange. Ethan lunged for the phone a second too late. His expression changed the moment he understood she had seen it. Neither of them spoke. Claire stared at him, and the entire moment rearranged itself inside her head like shattered glass finding a new pattern. The tenderness, the nostalgia, the timing. Him climbing into her bed the night before she was supposed to sign the final papers. This was not reconciliation. This was strategy. "Oh my God," she whispered. Claire did not sleep after Ethan left the room. He quietly took his pillow back to the guest room without another word, and somehow that silence felt more insulting than if he had screamed at her. Claire sat upright against the headboard, long after the hallway light disappeared beneath the crack under the door, replaying the text message over and over in her mind. Did she sign everything yet? Not, "Are you okay?" E.T., how was she holding up? The message sounded transactional. Impatient. Like someone waiting for paperwork to clear before collecting a package. Somewhere between exhaustion and humiliation, her grief began changing shape. It hardened, became sharper, more focused. For months, Claire had blamed herself for the failure of the marriage. She worked too much. She stopped trying. She became emotionally tired in ways Ethan could no longer tolerate. Women like Claire were raised to search themselves first whenever something broke. But lying there in the darkness, she began remembering things differently. Ethan insisting they refinance the house 2 years earlier because it was like smart timing. Ethan quietly taking over their investments. Ethan discouraging her from asking questions because financial discussions stressed her out. At the time, she had interpreted those things as confidence. Now they looked a great deal more like control. By the time pale morning light crept through the curtains, she had made a decision. She called off her shift at the hospital for the first time in 8 months. Then she waited until Ethan left for work. He came downstairs around 7:30 dressed in one of his navy suits, carrying the leather briefcase he had used for years. His expression looked cautious, rehearsed. Claire stood at the kitchen counter pouring coffee when he entered. "Morning," he said carefully. The normalcy of that single word almost made her laugh. "A morning," Ethan hesitated. "Air about last night. I'm tired, Ethan." He studied her face, calculating the damage. Claire kept her expression flat, exhausted, unreadable. Years working in surgery had taught her how to stay calm while chaos unfolded inches from her hands. He finally said, "I don't want us to make this uglier than it already is." "Not Jim, sorry. To not he can explain. Just a warning dressed as concern." At 8:15, Ethan backed his BMW out of the driveway and disappeared toward the train station. Claire waited 10 more minutes. Then she walked upstairs to his home office. Her pulse hammered hard enough to make her fingertips numb. The divorce folder sat exactly where she remembered it. She opened it slowly. At first glance, everything appeared reasonable. The house would be sold, retirement accounts divided, shared custody of Lily arranged fairly. But then Claire noticed something wrong. Several investment accounts listed in older tax returns were missing entirely from the disclosures. She hurried downstairs, pulled the filing box from the hall closet, and spread old financial records across the dining room table. Tax returns, mortgage paperwork, retirement statements. The more she searched, the colder she became. 2 accounts containing nearly $200,000 were nowhere in the divorce paperwork. Claire sat frozen in her dining room chair while morning sunlight crept slowly across the hardwood floor. $200,000 was not an oversight. That was concealment. By noon, she was sitting inside a small law office in downtown Neatville, across from a divorce attorney named Denise Holloway. Denise was in her early 50s, sharp-eyed and elegant without trying too hard, the kind of woman who radiated competence within 30 seconds of speaking. Family photos lined one side of her office, while thick legal books occupied the other. Claire trusted her immediately. After reviewing the documents quietly for several minutes, Denise removed her glasses and leaned back in her chair. "How familiar are you with your husband's finances?" Claire gave a humorless smile. "Apparently not very. These accounts don't disappear accidentally," Denise said. "I should have paid more attention." Denise is firm. "You trusted your spouse. Those are not the same thing." Something about hearing another woman say that nearly made Claire cry. Instead, she swallowed it down. Denise continued reviewing the paperwork, then paused and looked up. "Do you know who Vanessa Carroll is?" Claire blinked. "Oh, what?" These transfers include recurring payments tied to a consulting account registered under that name." "Yi issue." Claire's chest tightened immediately. "Vanessa, the name from the text. I think she works with him." "But..." Denise's expression shifted subtly, not surprise, something closer to confirmation. "I'd guess she's more involved than a colleague." "Is." Claire looked out the office window toward the snowy street below while humiliation crawled slowly through her. And suddenly, dozens of small moments began rearranging themselves into something uglier. Ethan working late, business trips increasing over the past year, his sudden obsession with fitness and expensive clothes. After 40, Claire had told herself she was too mature to obsess over the possibility of cheating. Now she understood she had simply been avoiding reality. "What do I do?" she asked quietly. Denise folded her hands together. First, you stop assuming your husband is negotiating in good faith." The sentence landed hard. Second, you do absolutely nothing impulsive. No confrontation, no angry texts, no emotional scenes. Men who hide assets during divorce usually believe their wives will react emotionally instead of strategically. "Oh." Claire let out a slow breath. Strategically. The word felt strange applied to her own marriage. "If you sign those papers tomorrow," Denise continued, "you could lose a substantial amount of money you are legally entitled to." "Oh." Claire nodded once. "And if your husband used marital funds improperly during an affair," Denise added quietly, "judges tend to take that personally." For the first time since the previous night, Claire felt something besides pain. She felt anger. Cold, controlled anger. Not the explosive kind that shattered dishes or inspired dramatic speeches. This kind was quieter. More dangerous. It was the anger of a woman who had just realized she had been profoundly underestimated. When Claire arrived home that evening, Ethan was already there cooking pasta in the kitchen, as if they were still a normal family. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the house. He looked up nervously when she walked in. "You okay?" he asked. Claire studied him for a long moment. This man had shared her bed for 14 years. He knew how she took her coffee, what songs made her cry, how her hands shook after difficult surgeries. And somewhere along the way, he had still convinced himself he could manipulate her into walking away quietly while he protected himself financially. That realization hurt more than the affair itself. "A long day," she said calmly. Ethan relaxed slightly. Then he smiled, and for the first time in her marriage, Claire smiled back while silently making plans he could not imagine. Over the next 10 days, Claire discovered something deeply unsettling about deception. The people doing it rarely believed they were villains. Ethan still held doors open for her. Still asked if she wanted coffee in the mornings. Still reminded Lily to wear a heavier coat before school because March winds around Chicago could turn brutal without warning. If a stranger had observed them casually, they would have seen a tired suburban couple navigating divorce with surprising maturity. That was precisely what made it so dangerous. Claire followed Denise's advice exactly. She did not confront Ethan about the hidden accounts. She did not mention Vanessa again. She did not let him realize she had stopped trusting him. Instead, she played the role he clearly expected, emotionally exhausted, overwhelmed, eager to keep things peaceful. And Ethan believed it completely. That part almost broke her heart more than the affair itself, because it meant he genuinely thought she was predictable. Every evening she sat across from him at the kitchen table, pretending to discuss logistics while studying him like a stranger. She noticed how carefully he chose his words now, how often he framed selfish decisions as concern for the family. We should sell the house quickly before interest rates shift. Us. You don't need to stress yourself reviewing every financial detail. Easy. I just want this process to stay respectful. Respectful. The word had become camouflage. Meanwhile, Denise and her forensic accountant quietly began pulling threads Ethan apparently assumed nobody would ever examine. By the end of the first week, the picture had become far uglier than Claire expected. The missing investment accounts were only the beginning. Ethan had also redirected performance bonuses into a secondary LLC connected indirectly to Vanessa Carroll. Thousands of dollars labeled as consulting disbursements were moving through accounts Claire had never seen before. Then Denise called on a Thursday afternoon. Claire was standing beside a supply cabinet at the hospital, gripping her phone, while nurses moved around her in blue scrubs. Your husband is either reckless, Denise said bluntly, or he thinks you're too intimidated to challenge him. Can he actually get away with this? Not if we document everything correctly. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Until now, part of her had still hoped for some misunderstanding buried beneath all of this, some explanation that would preserve at least a fragment of the man she had married. But numbers did not lie emotionally. They simply existed, and the numbers were ugly. That night, Ethan arrived home unusually cheerful. I made a reservation for Friday, he announced while loosening his tie. Somewhere nice. Thought maybe we should talk before mediation next week. Claire nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. He was trying to soften her. Again. Sure, she said quietly. Ethan looked visibly relieved. The restaurant he chose overlooked the Fox River. One of those upscale places with dim lighting, expensive bourbon, and couples pretending not to stare at their phones during dinner. Claire wore a black sweater dress and minimal makeup, enough to look composed without appearing to have tried too hard. Ethan noticed immediately. You look nice, he said as they sat down. Thanks. For the first 20 minutes, they discussed harmless things. Lily's grades, hospital staffing shortages, whether Claire planned to keep the Labrador after the divorce. The entire conversation felt surreal, like two actors performing a marriage from memory. Then Ethan leaned back in his chair and said, I know this hasn't been easy, but I think we've handled it better than most people would. There it was again, the narrative he desperately needed to preserve. We are civilized, mature, fair. Claire finally looked at him directly. Do you actually believe that? Ethan hesitated just long enough to answer her question accidentally. I think we both made mistakes, he said carefully. That sentence infuriated her because of how deliberately diluted it was. 14 years of marriage reduced to vague shared failure, while he secretly redirected money behind her back. But Claire simply nodded. You're probably right. Ethan relaxed again. Watching him underestimate her in real time had become strangely clarifying. His greatest weakness was not greed or even infidelity. It was arrogance. He genuinely believed he controlled the emotional temperature of every room he entered. The following Tuesday, Denise uncovered the detail that changed everything. Claire was sitting in her car outside a grocery store when the call came. You need to sit down before I explain this, Denise said immediately. Claire's pulse spiked. What happened? The educational account for your daughter. Silence. Claire gripped the steering wheel. What about it? There's significantly less money in it than there should be. Over the last 18 months, nearly $60,000 was withdrawn. Yeah. For a second, Claire genuinely stopped breathing. Where did it go? A pause. I'm mostly into the same secondary accounts connected to Vanessa Carril. Claire covered her mouth with her hand. Not because of the money. Because in that moment, every remaining excuse she had unconsciously held onto for Ethan collapsed completely. An affair was selfish. Hidden accounts were cruel. But stealing from your daughter's future to finance another life with another woman required a level of moral decay Claire could barely comprehend. And the worst part was that Lily worshipped her father. That night, Ethan came home carrying takeout from Claire's favorite Italian restaurant, smiling like a man who believed the hardest part of his life was almost behind him. Claire watched him set containers across the kitchen island while talking casually about office politics downtown. He seemed light, unburdened, almost cheerful. This will all be over soon, he said eventually. The sentence landed differently now. Not comforting, threatening. Claire imagined the life he was already building. An apartment downtown, Vanessa beside him, Lily visiting every other weekend while Ethan played at successful reinvention. All of it financed, in part, by money stolen from their daughter's future. Something inside Claire hardened permanently in that moment. Not rage, resolution. She smiled faintly. Yeah, she said. It will. 2 days later, mediation began. Ethan arrived wearing a charcoal suit and the confident expression of a man expecting paperwork rather than consequences. Claire noticed Vanessa through the conference room window before proceedings even started. Tall, polished, younger than Claire by at least 10 years. Beautiful in the aggressively curated way of women who treated attractiveness like a competitive sport. She stood near the elevator, scrolling her phone and pretending not to glance toward the mediation offices. Waiting. Claire almost pitied her, because women like Vanessa always believed they were stepping into a love story rather than standing near the blast radius of another woman's destruction. Ethan touched Claire's elbow gently before they entered the room. And no matter what happens, he said quietly, I want us to stay respectful. For Lily. What? Claire looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked into his eyes. And for the first time since she had seen that text message, she felt absolutely no desire to protect him. Yeah, of course, she said softly. Then she walked into the room carrying enough evidence to dismantle his carefully constructed life. Claire used to imagine revenge would feel explosive. She pictured screaming, public humiliation, the satisfaction of finally watching Ethan panic, the way he had made her panic for months. Instead, when the moment finally arrived, the room was almost unbearably quiet. The mediation office occupied the 12th floor of a glass building overlooking downtown Neepville. Beige walls, neutral artwork, a coffee station in the corner beside untouched pastries. Nobody seemed emotionally capable of eating. The entire environment was designed to make collapse appear professional. Claire sat beside Denise at one end of the polished conference table. Ethan settled across from them with his attorney, Richard Levinson, a silver-haired man whose expensive watch practically announced billable hours every time he moved his wrist. At first, everything proceeded exactly the way Ethan expected. Property division, retirement accounts, custody scheduling for Lily. Claire kept her shoulders slightly tense, her responses short, her expression tired. She gave him everything he was looking for. Denise handled most of the speaking while Claire quietly reviewed documents in front of her. Then the conversation shifted toward financial disclosures, and the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Richard slid a folder forward. My client believes the proposed settlement reflects a fair and equitable division of marital assets. Denise nodded pleasantly. I'm sure he does. She opened her own folder slowly, deliberately, and began removing printed financial statements, placing them on the table one at a time. The sound of paper sliding across polished wood seemed very loud in the silence. These accounts, Denise said calmly. You were not included in Mr. Morrison's disclosures. Ethan froze almost imperceptibly. Richard adjusted his glasses. I'm sorry? Denise slid another statement forward, and neither were these. Claire watched the exact moment Ethan understood what was happening. His entire body changed. Not dramatically. He was too controlled for that. But his jaw tightened slightly, and one hand curled against the armrest beneath the table. There must be some misunderstanding," Ethan said quickly. Denise remained perfectly calm. "There is no misunderstanding. We traced over $200,000 in undisclosed assets connected to secondary financial entities funded with marital income." Ewe. Silence. Richard turned slowly toward Ethan, his expression hardening. "Why am I seeing these for the first time?" Complicated then. He also discovered, Denise continued, repeated financial transfers connected to an individual named Vanessa Corral. Yet, that name landed like a grenade. Richard closed his eyes briefly. Ethan went pale, and Claire suddenly understood something with perfect clarity. Ethan had never truly expected consequences to become real. Somewhere deep inside himself, he genuinely believed charm and confidence would keep carrying him safely forward, the way they always had before. Men like Ethan confused delayed consequences with permanent immunity. Richard leaned forward slowly. Please tell me you did not redirect marital assets into an affair." And no one answered, because no answer existed that could save him now. The mediation paused briefly. Ethan followed Claire into the hallway, his face stripped raw beneath the polished exterior he had maintained for years. Claire," he said quietly, "please don't do this." The sentence stunned her, not because of what he said, because of what he didn't. Not "I'm sorry," could not he hurt you. You just panic dressed as a plea. Claire folded her arms. "You already did this, Ethan. You don't understand how complicated everything became." She looked at him steadily. "Did you really take money from Lily's college fund?" His silence answered first. Then he looked away. It was temporary. Claire flinched as though she had been struck. "I was going to replace it. Vanessa and I—" Claire laughed softly, but the sound carried no warmth whatsoever. "That's the problem. I don't think you even know what any of this was actually about anymore." A long pause settled between them. Then Ethan said, quietly and honestly, for perhaps the first time in years, "She made me feel important." The honesty of it hit harder than any excuse could have. Not love, not passion, vanity. 14 years of marriage dismantled because another woman made him feel successful. Claire looked at him standing there in an expensive suit outside a mediation office, terrified of losing money he had already tried to steal. And she felt something she had not expected. Not rage. Pity. Because Ethan had traded everything meaningful in his life for the temporary thrill of feeling admired. And now even that illusion was collapsing around him. When they returned to the conference room, the negotiations turned brutal. Richard, now fully aware his client had concealed assets, shifted immediately into damage control. Denise methodically presented transaction histories, hidden accounts, consulting transfers, and finally, the educational fund withdrawals. By the end, even the mediator looked disgusted. "This behavior will not reflect well in court," he warned Ethan flatly. No one needed further clarification. Illinois judges did not respond kindly to financial dishonesty during divorce proceedings, especially when a child's funds were involved. Ethan barely spoke for the remainder of the session. Claire remained calm throughout, not triumphant, simply calm, because somewhere during the past 2 weeks, revenge had quietly evolved into something else entirely: clarity. The marriage had been over long before Ethan climbed into her bed whispering A1 last time. Claire had simply not accepted it yet. Now she had. Hours later, after emergency negotiations and revised paperwork, the settlement changed dramatically. Claire retained a substantially larger portion of shared assets. Lily's educational fund was legally protected. The right to pursue further financial review was formally established. Ethan signed everything with shaking hands. The irony felt almost poetic. In the end, he became the one cornered into signing papers quickly. As Claire exited the building near sunset, she noticed Vanessa still standing near the elevators, exactly where she had been that morning. Only now she looked nervous. Ethan approached her several feet behind Claire, speaking urgently in low tones. "Not here! You said everything was handled. I didn't know, too." Claire kept walking. She did not look back. 3 weeks later, Ethan lost his job. Not officially because of the affair. Corporations rarely phrased things honestly. The internal investigation focused on financial irregularities tied to undisclosed conflicts of interest involving Vanessa Carroll. Apparently, his company had grown very interested once hidden transactions began appearing in legal documents. Vanessa resigned 2 days later. By then, the damage had already escaped containment. The suburban professional world around Chicago moved strangely fast when scandal entered the bloodstream. Rumors traveled through train platforms, office happy hours, gym locker rooms, and charity galas. Claire heard pieces secondhand from neighbors and colleagues who spoke carefully around her while quietly gathering details. Ethan moved into a furnished apartment near Downers Grove after selling his BMW. Vanessa disappeared entirely, and for the first time in nearly 15 years, Claire lived in a house that felt emotionally quiet. At first, the quiet frightened her. Then slowly, almost cautiously, she began to enjoy it. One Sunday morning in April, Claire stood barefoot in the kitchen making coffee, while soft rain tapped against the windows. Lily sat at the counter, eating cereal and scrolling through her phone, then suddenly looked up. "You seem different lately," she said. Claire smiled faintly. "You different good or different scary?" Good. Lily shrugged. "A lighter, I guess." The comment stayed with Claire all day, because children noticed freedom, too. The divorce finalized officially in early May. No dramatic courtroom showdown, no cinematic speeches. Just signatures, legal confirmations, and the strange anticlimactic feeling that always accompanied major life changes. Claire walked out of the courthouse carrying a leather folder and an exhaustion so deep it felt cellular. 14 years reduced to documents. Still, there was relief buried beneath the grief. Not happiness exactly. Relief. Like surviving surgery after months of unrelenting pain. That evening, Ethan called unexpectedly. Claire considered ignoring it, then answered anyway. His voice sounded different, thinner, stripped of the effortless confidence he had carried for years. "I heard Lily got accepted into Northwestern's summer program," he said quietly. "She did." "That's great." A long silence followed. Then finally, "I think I owe you an apology." Claire closed her eyes briefly. The words arrived months too late. But strangely, she realized she no longer needed them the way she once thought she would. "I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything," Ethan continued. "But I need you to know I wasn't trying to destroy you." Claire almost answered immediately, then she stopped herself, because she suddenly understood something important. Most people never consciously decide to ruin someone they love. They simply prioritize themselves, repeatedly, until destruction becomes unavoidable. "You didn't wake up one day wanting to hurt me," she said softly. "You just kept choosing yourself every single time it mattered." "Yes." Ethan inhaled shakily. Outside, rainwater slid slowly down the glass patio doors. Claire remembered the man she married at 24, ambitious, funny, insecure beneath the charm. Back then, Ethan used to talk about success as though it were something holy waiting just beyond reach. More money, better neighborhoods, bigger opportunities. And somewhere along the way, he had started measuring his own worth entirely through the admiration of others. Vanessa had not destroyed their marriage. She had simply arrived after Ethan had already hollowed himself out chasing validation. "I really did love you," he said quietly. Claire believed him. That was the tragic part. People could love you deeply and still betray you completely. The two things were not mutually exclusive. I know, she replied. Another silence settled between them, softer this time. Or when I climbed into your bed that night, Ethan began, then stopped briefly. A part of me actually wanted things to feel real again, even for just a few minutes. Oh, why? Claire stared down at her wedding ring sitting inside a small ceramic dish near the sink. She had stopped wearing it months ago but never managed to throw it away either. And the other part? She asked. Guy was terrified. Finally, the truth. Not romance, not passion, fear. Fear of losing money, fear of failure. Fear of consequences finally catching up to him all at once. Claire realized she no longer felt angry hearing it. Only tired. I hope you figure yourself out someday, she said honestly. Ethan laughed quietly and painfully. I'm starting to think that might take the rest of my life. Ish. After the call ended, Claire stood alone in the kitchen for several minutes, listening to rain against the roof. Then she picked up her wedding ring and placed it gently back inside the drawer. Not because the memories had disappeared, but because memories no longer needed to control her. By June, Claire sold the house in Neepville. Keeping it made no sense, financially or emotionally. Too many ghosts lived there. Arguments swallowed into silence. Lonely dinners. Years spent quietly shrinking herself to preserve a peace that was never really peace at all. She bought a smaller townhouse closer to the lake outside Evanston. Somewhere quieter, simpler, filled with sunlight instead of performance. The first night there, Lily helped unpack boxes while music played softly through the empty rooms. And no offense, Lily said while opening kitchen supplies. But Dad never really liked this kind of place. Claire looked around at the modest townhouse with its creaky floors and narrow staircase. Lie, Lily smirked slightly. That's probably why you do. Claire laughed, and the sound surprised them both. Over the following months, life slowly rebuilt itself in ordinary ways. Claire enrolled in an advanced healthcare administration program she had once postponed because Ethan thought it was impractical. She started sleeping through entire nights again. Started reading novels instead of staring numbly at television screens beside someone emotionally absent. Healing, she discovered, rarely arrived dramatically. It arrived quietly, in grocery shopping alone without anxiety, in drinking coffee on peaceful Sunday mornings, in realizing you no longer checked someone else's emotional temperature before making your own decisions. One evening near the end of summer, Claire was clearing old photos and messages from her phone when she stumbled across a screenshot she had forgotten existed. Did she sign everything yet? For a moment the memory hit hard again. The darkness of the bedroom. Ethan beside her. The exact instant her marriage transformed into something unrecognizable. Months earlier, that message had made her go cold. Now it simply made her sad. Sad for the woman who had still believed that love automatically guaranteed loyalty. Sad for the man who had traded his family for ego. Sad for how easily people destroyed genuinely good things while chasing temporary illusions. Claire stared at the screenshot one last time. Then she deleted it permanently, not out of forgiveness. Not because Ethan deserved absolution, but because carrying pain forever only extended the original betrayal. Some revenge satisfied anger. The best revenge restored freedom. That night, Claire sat on her small balcony overlooking Lake Michigan while warm wind moved softly through the dark. Inside, Lily laughed at something on television, safe and slowly healing and still fully capable of joy despite everything that had happened. Claire closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, her future did not feel like something to survive. It felt like something waiting to begin. That the deepest revenge is not destroying the person who hurt you. It is refusing to let them define the rest of your life.